Good day everyone. My name is Jomlo Lopez and I'm here to discuss the assigned topic of me, which is the content and contextual analysis of selected primary sources. For this topic, I'm going to look into a number of primary sources in Philippine history and evaluate the documents' content in terms of historical value. And also, I will examine the context of their production. Some primary sources that I will going to examine is the Dasalan at Tuksuhan, Manunggul Jur, and the First Voyage Around the World. The historian's primary tool of understanding and interpreting the past is the historical sources. Historical sources ascertain historical facts. Such facts are then analyzed and understood by the historian to weave a historical narrative. Before we tackle about the two types of criticism, I want first to differentiate a context to a content. When you say context, context refers to the parts of a discourse that surround a word for passage and can throw light on its meaning. Context is the events, circumstances, or background that help us to interpret a piece of work. It is simply means that as a physical characteristics. Um, while the content refers to the topics or matter treated in a work, particularly a written work. Content is what is contained in the work. So, in this, it is the contain what's author want to say or convey and what's he or her agenda. And now, what are the two types of criticism? The first one is the external criticism or the contextual analysis. And external criticism, it is the practice of verifying the authenticity of evidence by examining its physical characteristics, consistency with historical character of the time it was produced, and the materials used for the evidence. Contextual analysis considers especially the time, place, and situation when the primary sources is written. And the analysis as well includes the author's background, authority on the subject, and intent perceivable, its relevance in meaning to the people and the society today. The example of it is the type of ink, the quality of paper, and the words used in the material. And now, we move on to eternal criticism or the content analysis. Eternal criticism looks at the truthfulness and punctuality of the evidence by looking at the author of the source, if it's trustworthy, and its context, if it's fake or true, the evidence is such enough to prove it, and the agenda behind its creation, the knowledge which inform it and its intended purpose. Um, it looks at the content of the source and examines the circumstances of its production. Content analysis is a systematic evaluation of the primary source being a text, speech, or painting. That in this process, students can develop and present an argument based on their own understanding of the evidences from their readings. The students will identify pertinent information from the text or documents and explain its importance to their understanding of history in Philippine settings. The example of eternal criticism is the Japanese reports and declarations during the period of the war should not be taken as a historical fact hastily. Because eternal criticism entails that the historian acknowledge and analyze how such reports can be manipulated to be used as a war propaganda. Content and contextual analysis is an indispensable approach to strengthen the students' critical and analytical thinking skills and their ability to articulate their own ideas, views, and perspectives on a certain primary data or source. In order to achieve this, primary sources will be used and utilized for analysis. And also, validating historical sources is important because the use of unverified, falsified, and untruthful historical sources can lead to equally false conclusions without true criticisms of historical evidences. Historical deceptions and lies will be probable. Criticizing and analyzing the sources helps the historian to form a clear picture of the past or the event. It also helps students evaluate information they encountered, and lack of sources criticism can lead a reader or viewer to misinform and lead to them to draw an incorrect conclusion and make faulty decisions. I have three selected primary sources in Philippines. The first is the Dasalan at Tuksuhan, second the Manunggul, and third is the Pigapitas account, which is the first voyage around the world by Magellan. The Dasalan at Tuksuhan, it is a satire on the friars' hypocrisy, licentiousness, and cupidity, which consists of parodies of the sign of the cross, the act of contrition, the Lord's Prayer, the Hail Mary, and the Catechism. Rizal considered this as a model of classical prose and an excellent example of Tagalog humor, wit, and sarcasm. The author of the Sala na Tuksuhan is Marcelo H. del Pilar. He is popularly known for his pen name, Peping Dilat, Plaridel, Popdo, and Dolores Manapat. He was born at Kupang, San Nicolas, Bulacan on August 30, 1850. His parents were Julian H. del Pilar, noted Filipino writer, and Piazza Gatmaitan. The Dasalan at Tuksuhan, it is a collection of works that guide or direct the prayers and catechism taught by the Spanish priests. It is a literary work of Del Pilar in 1888 during the propaganda movement. Published like the Catholic novenas, formatted as pamphlets, by the help of Pedro Serrano Lactau. It served as an eye-opener for the Filipinos about the abuse of the friars that behind their holy image is a greedy and corrupt priest. Thus it ignited the heart of Filipino nationalism to overthrow the priocracy in the Philippines. The second primary sources that we are going to tackle is the Manunggul jar. Manunggul jar is a unique Neolithic secondary burial jar with incised running scroll and impressed decorations. One of the Philippines' cultural treasures and early pre-colonial artwork. The Manunggul jar shows that the Filipinos' maritime culture is a paramount and it reflected its ancestors' religious beliefs. The Manunggul jar was found by Dr. Robert B. Fax and Miguel Antonio in 1962. It was found alongside the discovery of the remains of Tabon Man. It was discovered by Dr. Fox in chamber of a Manunggul cave in southwestern Palawan. The jar was covered with two human figures riding on a boat. The human figure at the back is holding a paddle with both hands, while the one in front has its two arms crossed against the chest. The boat also has eyes and mouth. The upper portion of the jar was carved scrolls. The last primary sources that are we going to tackle is the first voyage around the world. It narrates the events happened on the first voyage around the world led by a Spanish captain general named Ferdinand Magellan. This is according to the point of view of Antonio Pigapitas, the first chronicler who's accompanied Magellan in the circumnavigation of the world. So, who's Antonio Pigapitas? Antonio Pigapitas was an Italian scholar and explorer. He joined the expedition to the Spice Islands led by explorer Ferdinand Magellan under the flag of the Emperor Charles V. And after Magellan's death in the Philippines Islands, the subsequent voyage around the world. Antonio Pigafetta was one of the survivors who kept a journal that became the main source about the first encounter of the Spaniards in the Filipinos. The original journal of Pigafetta did not survive in history, and what was handed to us are copies of manuscripts that never came out of the press during his lifetime. His writing described vividly the physical appearance, social life, religious beliefs, and cultural practices of the people they encountered in the Samar, Leyte, and Cebu. In 18th century, Carlo Amoretti published an Italian version of it, and the following year a French version came out in Paris. Pinkerton, of his part, translated it into English and published it in 1819. And in March 25, 1521, they saw two balanghay. Balanghay that full of people in Masaba, Masawa. And Magellan exchanged gifts with them and expressed his desire to be brothers. And Magellan shared to the king how they found the islands. The first mass held in Philippines. Magellan planted a giant cross in our land, and it became the famed Magellan Cross, which is still preserved in present today. The King of Cebu was baptized as Christian. People wished to become Christians through their free will and not because they were forced and intimidated. The Battle of Mactan. Magellan decided to go to Mactan to fight Lapu-Lapu. Magellan forces arrived in Mactan in daylight. The number in 49 total, and the islander of Mactan were estimated as 1,500. That was Magellan dead. Groups of Magellan did not enough to fight for the forces of Lapu-Lapu. So that's why Magellan lost and Lapu-Lapu wins. And that's the end of our topic for today. So, thank you for listening and watching. So, have a nice day. Thank you.